My name is Alex Harper. Last winter, I decided to take a solo camping trip with my loyal German Shepherd Max deep into the remote hills of the Appalachian backcountry in North Carolina. I had a few days off from my job as a mechanic in a small town, and all I wanted was complete solitude. No people, no noise, just me, my dog, and the quiet embrace of nature. I packed my truck with all the essential gear: a sturdy four-season tent, a heavy sleeping bag rated for sub-zero temperatures, plenty of food, a portable stove, and my reliable 9mm handgun for safety in such isolated areas. Max was excited, wagging his tail non-stop as we loaded up. The drive took me along a forgotten dirt road that wound higher and higher into the mountains. Snow had fallen heavily the week before, turning the path into a slippery, icy track with deep ruts. There were no other vehicles in sight for miles. After nearly an hour of careful driving, I pulled off at an old, overgrown clearing that looked like it hadn't seen a visitor in years. From there, I shouldered my heavy backpack, clipped Max's leash, and hiked another 25 minutes through thick, snow-covered pines until I found the perfect spot: a small, sheltered clearing ringed by dense evergreen trees. The snow here was pristine and untouched, like a blank white canvas with no footprints except my own. This was exactly what I had been craving. I dropped my pack and began setting up camp. Max explored nearby, sniffing around excitedly but never straying too far. I cleared a flat area for the tent, stamped down the snow, and pitched it securely, driving the stakes deep into the frozen ground. Inside, I unrolled my insulated sleeping pad and winter sleeping bag. The temperature was already dropping fast toward the teens, so I kept my layers on: thermal underwear, thick wool socks, a fleece jacket, and my heavy insulated parka. Once the shelter was ready, I gathered dry branches and built a small fire pit a safe distance away. The flames crackled to life, providing welcome warmth and a place to cook a simple dinner of canned stew and rice. I sat on a fallen log, eating slowly while Max lounged beside me, his fur glowing in the firelight. The forest was eerily silent in that special way only deep winter brings. Snow muffles sound like a thick blanket, absorbing every noise until the world feels hushed and distant. My father had taught me that years ago during childhood hunting trips. After finishing my meal, I leaned back, staring at the stars peeking through the branches, feeling at peace. Suddenly, Max shot to his feet and began barking sharply toward the tree line. At first, I wasn't alarmed. Deer and small animals were common here, and he often reacted to them. I calmed him down with a few words, and he settled after a minute. I checked my watch. It was getting late, but I decided to enjoy the fire a little longer. My handgun rested comfortably in its holster at my hip, a standard precaution for remote camping. About 20 minutes passed. Then Max erupted again, this time with deeper, more urgent barks. I heard it too, the distinct crunch of footsteps in the snow, coming from somewhere in the darkness beyond the trees. I stood up slowly, straining my ears. The steps paused, then resumed. Max shifted from barking to a low, groundling growl, his body tense. He stared fixedly into the shadows. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. There, at the edge of the clearing where the firelight barely reached, stood a shadowy figure. Half hidden by the thick trunks, it was clearly a man. I called out in a steady voice, "Hey, you startled me. It's okay, Max." The figure remained motionless for several long seconds, then took a slow step forward. He was tall and thin, wearing a dark jacket and worn boots, with unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. His eyes looked hollow in the flickering glow. In a rough, unfriendly tone, he asked, "What are you doing way out here this deep in the woods?" I replied calmly that I was just camping for some alone time with my dog. He didn't answer immediately. He just stood there, staring at me and the tent, his gaze lingering a little too long. The atmosphere felt wrong, heavy with tension. I kept my voice even and said, "I'm armed, just so you know." The man let out a short, mocking laugh. "Armed, huh? Threatening me instead of offering some hospitality? Where's your manners out here?" His words carried an edge that made my skin crawl. Then, without another word, he turned and melted back into the trees. His footsteps faded gradually until silence returned. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity, heart pounding, scanning the tree line. Max stayed glued to my side, alert and watchful. Eventually, I convinced myself he was gone. I doused the fire meticulously, piling snow on the embers and stirring until no glow remained. I didn't want any light attracting unwanted attention. We retreated into the tent, zipping it tightly shut. Inside, I did everything possible to stay warm. Extra hand warmers against my core and feet, hat pulled low, sleeping bags cinched around me. Max curled up close, his body heat a huge comfort. I lay there in the total blackness, listening to the profound silence of the snow-covered forest. Sleep felt far away. Then, after some time, Max began growling again, low and menacing. I heard footsteps once more, crunching through the snow, coming closer. They stopped right outside the tent wall. Max let out a loud howl. I whispered urgently for him to be quiet, terrified of escalating things. The intruder stood there. I could hear the faint shift of weight in the snow, the subtle movements of someone lingering just inches away. My hand gripped the handgun tightly now. I didn't want to threaten or shoot anyone. I'd never done that in my life, but fear was taking over. Finally, I couldn't bear the tension. I racked the slide loudly and called out clearly, "I have a gun in here. You need to leave right now." Silence. Then the footsteps retreated, slowly at first, then quicker, vanishing into the woods. I didn't dare open the tent to look. We stayed awake and alert for hours. Max never relaxed fully, which gave me the only sense of security I had. I barely slept that night, jolting awake at every imagined sound. At the first hint of dawn, I packed up frantically and hiked back to the truck as fast as possible. I drove away without looking back. That part of the mountains is now off limits for me forever. Encounters like that remind you that even in the most remote places, you're never truly alone, and not everyone out there has good intentions.
My name is Ryan Caldwell. Last summer, during the long July 4th weekend, I drove down to visit my old college friend Marcus in the historic coastal city of Savannah, Georgia. Marcus had just moved into a beautiful, old two-story house in the downtown historic district, and he invited me to stay for the weekend. The plan was simple: barbecue, fireworks over the river, catch up on old times, and enjoy the southern summer vibe. I arrived Friday afternoon with a cooler full of drinks and my camera, excited for a relaxing getaway. Marcus greeted me warmly at the door. His place was stunning. High ceilings, creaky wooden floors, tall windows overlooking a quiet, tree-lined street. He showed me to the guest room upstairs, which had a perfect view of the backyard garden and the narrow alley behind the house. After unpacking, we spent the evening grilling steaks on the back porch, drinking cold beer, and talking about everything from work to old memories. The night was warm and humid, typical for coastal Georgia in July. Around 10 p.m., we walked down to the riverfront to watch the early fireworks. The streets were crowded with tourists and locals, music playing, lights everywhere. That's when I first noticed him. Near the edge of the water, standing a little apart from the crowd, was a tall, thin man dressed in a full white wedding suit, complete with a bow tie and polished dress shoes. It looked completely out of place on a hot summer night. He wasn't watching the fireworks. He was staring directly at the people walking by, his head turning slowly like he was searching for someone. His face was pale, almost sickly under the streetlights. I pointed him out to Marcus and joked, "Looks like someone got stewed up at their own wedding." Marcus laughed it off, but I saw him glance back at the man once more before we headed home. We returned to the house around midnight. The neighborhood had grown quieter. Most houses had their lights off. I took a quick shower and went to my room. The tall window faced the back alley, and I left the curtains slightly open for some breeze. As I lay in bed scrolling through my phone, something caught my eye outside. There he was again, the same man in the white suit standing motionless in the alley behind the house. He was looking up toward the second floor, right in the direction of my window. I froze. How did he get here so fast? The riverfront was several blocks away. I quietly moved closer to the glass and watched. He didn't move for almost 5 full minutes, just stood there, staring. Then he slowly turned and disappeared down the alley into the darkness. I told Marcus about it the next morning. He looked a bit uneasy but tried to brush it off, saying maybe the guy was just drunk or lost. We spent Saturday exploring the city, historic squares, good food, more fireworks in the evening, but I kept thinking about that man. Something about his eyes felt wrong. That night, around 1:30 a.m., I woke up suddenly. The house was dead silent except for the ceiling fan. I felt an urge to check the window. I crept over and peered through the curtains. There he was, again, the same man in the white suit standing motionless in the alley behind the house. He was staring up toward the second floor, right in the direction of my window. This time he was standing closer, almost directly behind the garden fence. The white suit glowed faintly under the distant streetlight. He wasn't just standing, he was watching the house with intense focus. I could see his head tilted upward, scanning the windows one by one. My heart started racing. I stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. After what felt like forever, he walked slowly along the fence line, then vanished behind the neighbor's shed. I woke Marcus up and told him. This time he took it more seriously. We checked all the doors and windows, made sure they were locked, and even turned on the porch light. Neither of us slept much after that. Sunday night was the worst. We had decided to stay in and watch a movie. Around 11 p.m., Marcus went downstairs to grab more snacks. I stayed in the living room. Suddenly, I heard him call my name urgently from the kitchen. I ran down. Marcus was standing by the back door window, pointing. He's out there right now. I looked. The man in the white suit was standing in the middle of the backyard, no more than 20 feet from the house. He wasn't moving. His hands were clasped in front of him, like he was waiting patiently at an altar. The expression on his face was completely blank, but his eyes were locked on the house, on us. We both stepped back from the window. Marcus grabbed his phone and started recording. The man remained motionless for several minutes. Then, without any warning, he raised one hand and gave a slow, deliberate wave, as if he knew we were watching him. My blood ran cold. Marcus yelled through the door, "Hey, get off my property or I'm calling the police." The man didn't react immediately. He just lowered his hand, turned around slowly, and walked back toward the alley. But before disappearing completely, he stopped, looked back over his shoulder one last time, and smiled. It was not a friendly smile. We called the police that night. They came, took a report, and searched the area, but found nothing. The officer said they'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. We stayed up until sunrise, taking turns watching the windows. The next morning, I packed my things early. Marcus was clearly shaken too. As I was loading my car, I noticed something on the wooden fence at the back of the garden. Fresh scratches, like someone had been clawing at it. And right in the center, written in what looked like dirt or chalk, were the words, "See you soon." I didn't tell Marcus about that. I just got in my car and drove away, checking my rearview mirror the entire time. Even now, months later, I still get uneasy when I see someone in light-colored clothing at night.
That weekend in Savannah taught me that sometimes the scariest things aren't deep in the woods. They can find you right in the middle of a busy, beautiful city.
My name is Jordan Ellis. I live alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood just outside Portland, Oregon. A few years ago, I bought a small, single-story house with a basement. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. I work remotely as a graphic designer, so my days are pretty routine. Wake up, make coffee, work at my desk, hit the gym late at night when it's empty, come home and unwind. I don't socialize much with neighbors, and I like it that way. That predictable, quiet life is exactly why it took me so long to realize something was terribly wrong. It started on a cold Tuesday night in late January. I had fallen asleep on the couch with the TV still murmuring low. Around 2:30 a.m., a soft but distinct thump from the back of the house pulled me half awake. It sounded like something heavy had been set down, or a door had bumped against the frame. My first thought was that a picture had fallen, or the old house had simply shifted in the cold. Houses make noises, right? I muted the TV and listened. Silence. After a few minutes, I got up, checked the back door, it was locked, and went to bed. The next morning, I noticed the back door handle felt loose, like someone had been yanking on it. The deadbolt still worked fine, but the whole mechanism wiggled more than usual. I told myself I'd tighten the screws later and moved on with my day. That night, I went to the gym around 11 p.m. as usual. When I pulled into my driveway just after midnight, the porch light was off. I always leave it on. It's on a timer. I sat in the car for a moment, trying to remember if I had forgotten. Inside, everything looked normal. Still, something felt off, so I walked through every room before going to bed. That was the first time I had ever done a full security check like that. Thursday morning brought another odd detail. My phone was at only 12% battery, even though I clearly remembered plugging it in before sleep. The cable was still attached to the phone on my nightstand, but the charger had been pulled out of the wall outlet. I convinced myself I must have knocked it loose while sleeping, though deep down that explanation felt weak. By Friday, I was paying much closer attention. That evening, I stayed up late in the dark living room with the TV off, just listening. Around 3 a.m., I heard slow, deliberate thumps coming from the rear of the house, like careful footsteps on the wooden floor near the back door. I held my breath. The sounds stopped. I told myself it was probably a neighbor or an animal outside, but my stomach was already twisting. Saturday morning, I discovered muddy shoe prints on the floor just inside the back door. They weren't clear footprints with distinct tread patterns. They looked deliberately smeared, as if someone had tried to wipe them away. My heart pounded. I hadn't gone outside in muddy shoes. No one had visited. I examined the door more closely and spotted faint scratch marks around the lock, like someone had worked at it with a thin tool. I called a locksmith immediately. He came that afternoon, replaced the entire lock, and assured me it was now much more secure. That night, I pushed a heavy chair under the back door handle for extra protection and locked my bedroom door, something I had never done before in my own home. Around 4 a.m., I woke to a light tapping on my bedroom door. Not a knock, more like fingertips gently testing the wood. I lay completely still, staring at the door in the darkness, too afraid to even blink. The tapping continued softly for nearly a minute, then stopped. Soft footsteps retreated down the hallway. I didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, the chair was still wedged under the back door handle, but the new lock had been unlocked from the inside. The door itself wasn't forced or damaged. It had simply been opened. That was the moment real terror set in. Someone had been inside my house while I slept. They knew how to move quietly, how to unlock doors from inside, and how to leave almost no trace. I called the police. They searched the house and yard but found no clear signs of forced entry. They suggested I might have sleepwalked and unlocked the door myself. I knew that wasn't true.
Still, without evidence, there was little they could do. They advised me to install cameras and stay vigilant.
That night, I stayed awake with every light in the house on and a kitchen knife on the table in front of me. Around 2 a.m., I heard movement from the basement. The basement door, which I always kept closed, was now cracked open a few inches. A wave of icy dread washed over me. I stared at that dark gap, frozen. Slowly, I approached and peeked down the stairs. Nothing visible, but the air felt heavier, like someone had just been there. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the brightest corner of the living room, knife in hand, jumping at every creak. The next few days, I barely slept. I installed cheap motion cameras inside and outside the house, added extra deadbolts, and even put bells on the doors. But the feeling of being watched never left. One final night, just before I decided to move out, I awoke to the sound of breathing, slow and steady, coming from somewhere inside my bedroom closet. I didn't open the door. I grabbed my phone, called 911, and waited outside in my car until the police arrived. They found the house empty, but one of the officers noticed that the basement window, which I had checked earlier, was now unlocked from the inside. I moved out 2 weeks later. I sold the house at a loss and never looked back. To this day, I still wake up sometimes hearing those soft thumps or the faint tapping on a door. Living alone used to feel peaceful. Now it feels like an invitation. If you ever start noticing small things out of place in your own home, a loose handle, a moved charger, a single muddy print, don't brush them off. Check everything twice, because sometimes the intruder isn't outside trying to get in. Sometimes they're already inside, waiting patiently for you to fall asleep.
My name is Taylor Brooks. I'm a long-haul truck driver based in Knoxville, Tennessee. For the last 6 years, I've run the same route from Tennessee through the Appalachian Mountains into Kentucky, delivering goods to warehouses along Interstate 75, and then taking the quieter state roads back. Most nights, it's peaceful. Just me, the radio, and the long, dark stretches of highway lined with thick forest. But one particular week in early November changed everything. I still won't drive that section of Route 47 after dark if I can avoid it. It was a Tuesday night, around 1:15 a.m. I had just dropped off a load in Corbin and was heading back toward the Tennessee line on the old 2-lane Route 47. The road cuts through dense woodland with almost no houses or businesses for nearly 30 miles. Fog was rolling in thick, and the temperature had dropped enough that my windshield kept frosting at the edges. I had the heater on full blast and was sipping coffee from my thermos when my phone rang. The number was unknown, no name. Normally, I don't answer while driving, but something made me hit the speaker button. "Hello?" I said. There was silence at first. Then a low, raspy voice, a man's voice, spoke slowly. "Taylor, you're driving too fast. Slow down." I felt a jolt. How did this person know my name, and how did they know I was driving? I checked my speed. I was doing 68 in a 55 zone. I eased off the gas. "Who is this?" I demanded. The voice ignored my question. "There's a curve coming up in about 2 miles. Watch the shoulder. She's waiting there." Then the line went dead. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was probably some sick prank or a trucker playing games on the CB who got my number somehow. But the road ahead did have a sharp curve exactly where he said. I slowed down even more. As my headlights swept around the bend, I saw her, a woman in a light-colored dress, standing on the gravel shoulder, staring straight at the road. No car, no phone, nothing. Just her, alone in the freezing fog at 1:30 in the morning. I drove past without stopping. In my side mirror, I watched her turn her head to follow my truck,
until the fog swallowed her. My heart was hammering. I called my dispatcher and told him what happened. He laughed it off and said I needed more sleep. The next night, I was on the same route again. Same time, same empty stretch. My phone rang at almost exactly 1:15 a.m. Same unknown number. "Taylor, you shouldn't have left her there. She doesn't like being ignored." I hung up immediately and blocked the number. 10 minutes later, it rang from a different unknown number. Same voice. "You can't block me, Taylor. I'm already ahead of you." I pulled into a small gas station that was still open, bought more coffee, and sat in the bright lights for 20 minutes trying to calm down. When I got back on the road, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. They stayed exactly the same distance behind me for the next 15 miles. No matter how fast or slow I went, they matched my speed perfectly. Then, without warning, they vanished. There were no turnoffs, no side roads, just empty black forest on both sides.
Thursday night was the worst. I tried to take a different route to avoid Route 47 entirely, but a wreck on the interstate forced me back onto it. At 1:10 a.m., the phone rang again. This time, the voice was different, softer, almost feminine, but distorted. "Taylor, I'm cold. Why won't you help me?" I was gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I started talking out loud to myself, trying to stay focused. Then my CB radio crackled to life, even though it was turned off. A child's voice came through. "Daddy, the lady is in the back." I don't have any children. I pulled over immediately on the narrow shoulder, hazard lights flashing, and grabbed my flashlight and the small .380 pistol I keep in the glove box. I walked all the way around the trailer, checking every latch and lock. Nothing. No one hiding. The forest was dead silent, except for my own breathing. When I climbed back into the cab, the phone was ringing again. I answered on speaker. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. The original raspy man's voice returned, sounding closer than ever. "We want you to stop running, Taylor. You've been running your whole life. She just wants to ride with you tonight." In the rear view mirror, I saw movement inside the sleeper berth behind my seat. A pale hand slowly reached out from the darkness and touched the back of my headrest. I screamed, slammed the truck into gear, and floored it. I drove the next 30 miles without stopping, doing nearly 90 miles on that twisting mountain road, eyes darting between the road and the mirror. The hand was gone, but I could still feel the cold touch on my neck. I made it to the next truck stop just before dawn and sat in the restaurant until the sun came up, drinking coffee and staring at nothing. I told the manager what happened. He gave me a strange look and said, "You're not the first driver to mention something like that on Route 47. Some folks say it's the ghost of a woman who was killed hitchhiking back in the 80s. Others say it's something worse." I finished my deliveries that week on pure adrenaline, then took 2 weeks off. When I finally went back to work, I changed my entire route schedule. I now avoid night runs on that road completely. But sometimes, even on completely different highways, hundreds of miles away, my phone still rings at 1:15 a.m. from unknown numbers. I never answer anymore. I just let it ring until it stops. And every single time, right after it stops, I feel that same cold touch on the back of my neck, just for a second. If you ever drive long, empty roads at night and your phone rings with an unknown number, maybe just keep driving. Some calls aren't meant to be answered, and some passengers don't need a seat. They only need you to acknowledge they're already riding with you.
My name is Emily Harper. I'm a 28-year-old elementary school teacher living in a quiet apartment complex on the outskirts of Austin, Texas. My life is ordinary. Lesson plans during the day, yoga in the evening, and scrolling through my phone before bed. I've always been careful with my privacy. Two-factor authentication on everything, strong passwords, never sharing my location. That's why what started happening in mid-October last year completely shattered my sense of safety. It began with a single text message at 2:47 a.m. The sender was my own phone number. "Hey Em, don't forget to lock the balcony door tonight." I sat up in bed, heart racing. I live on the second floor and almost never use the balcony. I checked, the door was unlocked. I locked it immediately and tried to call my own number. It went straight to voicemail with my normal greeting. I told myself it was a glitch, maybe a spoofed number or some weird app error. I went back to sleep, uneasy but exhausted. The next night, another message from myself at almost the exact same time. "You left the kitchen light on again. He doesn't like bright lights." I hadn't left any light on. I live alone. I double-checked every room, then changed my phone's PIN and turned on all notifications. The following morning, I called my carrier. They said no unusual activity on my account and suggested it might be a contact sync issue. 3 nights passed without anything. I started to relax. Then came the voice note. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed, a 17-second audio file from my own number. I played it with the volume low. It was my voice, exactly my voice, whispering, "He's standing behind the curtain right now. Don't look." I nearly dropped the phone. My bedroom curtains were closed. I yanked a lamp and yanked them open. Nothing, just the dark parking lot below. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. In the morning, I recorded a new voice memo of myself saying random words and compared it. The whisper matched my voice perfectly in tone, pitch, and breathing pattern. The messages kept coming, each one more personal. One night, "You left the black hoodie you wore yesterday is still in the dryer. Take it out before he touches it."
Another night, "You smiled at the wrong person at the coffee shop today. He noticed." I started checking my security camera app obsessively. Nothing unusual ever showed up. No one at my door, no movement in the apartment. But the messages knew things only I could know. What I wore, what I ate, conversations I had with friends. On November 5th, the tone changed. "Emily, stop trying to block me. I am you. I've always been here." I took screenshots of everything and went to the police. They looked at me like I was crazy. "Ma'am, you can't file a report against yourself." They suggested I see a therapist or change my number. I did both. New number, new SIM card, factory reset on my phone. That same night, at 2:47 a.m., my old number, which I had disconnected, sent a message to my brand new number. "Nice try. Changing numbers won't help. I'm already inside the walls." I moved out the next day. I told my landlord it was a family emergency and crashed at my sister's place across town. For one blessed week, silence, no messages. Then, on the 8th night, my sister's phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m. She showed me the screen, confused. Sender, my new number. "Tell Emily she left her favorite mug in the old apartment. I'm drinking from it right now." My sister turned pale. We stayed up all night with every light on, watching each other's phones. I haven't slept properly since. I deleted all social media, I stopped using smart devices, I even bought a cheap flip phone. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel the vibration in my pocket, even when the phone is across the room. When I check, there's always a new message waiting from a number that shouldn't exist. The last message I received just before I decided to tell this story said,
Emily, you can run to different cities, different phones, different lives, but you can't run from yourself. I'll be waiting when you close your eyes tonight. I don't know who or what is sending these messages. Maybe it's a hacker with terrifying access. Maybe it's something that learned to copy me perfectly. Or maybe, in some impossible way, it really is a version of me that never leaves the apartment, watching, waiting, slowly stepping closer every night. If you ever get a message from your own number in the dead of night, don't answer it. Don't listen. Just leave everything behind and run. Because once it learns your voice, your habits, your fears, it never lets go. It becomes you, and you become the one who's no longer welcome in your own life.